Welcome to The Topic, where we highlight Houston Community College, our students, our programs, and our reach into the community. I'm Todd Duplantis. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. We are live most Tuesday afternoons when HCC is in session. You can watch us live on Facebook and YouTube and catch the recordings of all of our shows in social media and also on HCC TV. This month, we're talking about Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. In this edition of The Topic, we'll be celebrating with three leaders from that community. First, we're joined by Dr. Muddassir Siddiqi. He is the president of HCC Central College, and he joins us now live. Dr. Siddiqi, good to see you.
Good to see you, Todd, and thank you for hosting such a wonderful event in observance of Asia Pacific Islander Month. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Let's start off talking about your journey to HCC. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
You know, my journey has been, I would say, wonderful. I came Houston 2017, and I was new in the city because I came from Chicago, but I found people were very welcoming, and they are very welcoming. And it made my entire transition from a big city, Chicago, to another big city pretty seamless. I made a lot of friends for business, for social. I think it's a wonderful experience overall to live and work in Houston, one of the most diverse cities in our country. So,
well, I was going to ask you about the changes between Houston and Chicago, and you mentioned diversity. I'll throw a few questions at you. If you could pick food in Houston, food in Chicago, what's your pick there?
You know, I would say I would be indecisive because,
good answer.
You know, there are certain things in Chicago that you won't find elsewhere, like, you know, deep dish pizza and hot dogs, which I love. But while in Houston, you have so variety of foods from different countries and, you know, like barbecue and other stuff. So it's very difficult to compare and contrast. So I'm a little biased in not making a commitment.
Good answer. Good answer there. Let me ask you this. Your Central Campus, you're the president over the Central Campus. You've been there for a few years, and there's been a lot of new things happening on the campus. Something that's new that just opened in the last couple of years is your brand new Culinary Arts Center. Boy, that thing is state of the art. Maybe you can tell us about some of the features and how it'll be helping our students.
So, you know, Houston is a foodie city, right? There's a great number of restaurants. There are almost 13,000 restaurants in greater Houston area and large number of hotels, Texas Medical Center. And so there's a need for preparing a workforce and culinary arts program, right? Just so they can serve in Houston, they can operate their own businesses. So we are very fortunate to have board approval, community support to put together a new building before COVID-19, I believe 2018. This building has two large culinary art labs, state of the art, and two pastry art labs and a specialized kitchen. So we are entertaining the education needs of more than 200 students right now as of the spring semester. In the fall, we are expecting more numbers because we are coming out of COVID-19. Students start coming to the campus. It's a wonderful program. It provides best-in-class culinary education at a very affordable price. So I'm very excited about the prospect of this new building and the program development in the years to come.
It's an incredible facility. If you haven't seen it, folks, you got to check it out. And I know, we do every Tuesday on Up to the Minute, we feature a local restaurant and show them a little love. But you would be surprised at how many chefs, restaurant owners that went through HCC and can say, I went to HCC, I graduated from there, took some classes from there. I hire my workers out of HCC, but one of the most famous ones also has a location in the building. Hugo Ortega. He's definitely he's definitely laid his blueprint on that building with donations and making himself available for our students.
That's true. As such, 2 weeks ago, we hosted a ribbon cutting ceremony where we recognize Chef Hugo Ortega and his brother Ruben Ortega. As you know, that Chef Ortega received the premium award, James Brad Award, which is almost Oscar in filmmaking, in culinary arts. And this is a pride for Houston Community College, for our department, and for our community at large.
Absolutely. And you also have something called the Upward Bound Grant. That's a big deal. Maybe you can tell us about that.
So Upward Bound Grant is a federal grant. And I would very happy to say that last Monday, we received the notification for renewal. This time we received more money based on our performance and our commitment. The purpose of this grant is to bring high school students in their junior and seniors into a cohort and prepare them for college level programming, coursework or programming. Last week, we graduated 38 students from the Upward Bound program from 5 high schools. The purpose of this program, again, as I said before, is to recruit students from like first generation, low-income students, so they have exposure to the college during their high school. And we found this path has been very successful, right, in connecting students to college.
That's a great deal. And you've been around at HCC for now, what, 5 years, since you mentioned 2017 when you came
2017.
You've gone through a lot since you've been here. You've been through Hurricane Harvey. You've been through countless floods, a pandemic, which none of us have gone through. What's been the most challenging, the most rewarding thing for you?
I think it's challenging because, we don't have to worry about our own self only, right? We have to worry about our students, faculty members, staff, our buildings, so we can keep our business continue, right? So that was a challenge in both Hurricane Harvey and also COVID-19. I think it's all about learning. I think for my own personal level, I feel it built more resiliency in me, like a spirit of fighting, courage. And I learned a lot from these events. So I think this was a learning lesson for me and a lot of people around me. So.
Dr. Muddassir Siddiqi, the president of HCC Central College, we appreciate you being with us to celebrate AAPI month this afternoon. Thanks for sharing your information and a bit about your journey here to HCC. We'll see you again next time.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll meet with one of our communications directors and we'll learn about the history of Houston's Chinese American community. Stay tuned. The topic returns in 60 seconds.
Sometimes what you need just shows up. Houston Community College has your back, whether you're knocking out some basics or upping your game for a better job. Enroll today for spring classes and frame your future with HCC.
For more than a year, we have kept you informed with more than 500 remote episodes. But now we're back, bigger and better with more news and more guests. Join us live every weekday at 10 a.m. on Facebook and YouTube, and on HCC TV at noon and 5 p.m. You can watch from anywhere. We go where you go.
Welcome back to The Topic. I'm Todd Duplantis. We're live this Tuesday afternoon, as we are most Tuesdays at 1 p.m. That's when HCC is in session. You can catch the rebroadcast of our show in social media. Look for us as Houston Community College District. You can also catch us on HCC TV. And if you're into podcasts, you can download the audio versions of all of our programming at hccs.edu/podcasts. We are observing Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And this afternoon, we're now joined by Zheng, who is the Director of Communication Services at HCC Southwest College. Zheng, good to see you again. You hadn't been on the show before. Now in a span of 2 weeks, we've had you on twice. So you're back again. It's good to see you. Let's see if we can get you to unmute your mic. You're still muted there. There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good to see you, Zheng. Last time you were on Up to the Minute, we were getting into talking about your recent event. You were at the Fort Bend County's Historical Courthouse, and you laid out some history of Chinese Americans, not only in the country, but how they migrated here to Texas. Maybe you could pick that up and tell us a bit about, first off, why you were at the Historical Courthouse and a bit about the event.
Yes, I was there, and it was an honor for me to be part of the Asian Pacific Native Hawaiian, Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander. This is the new moniker for this year's celebration. And I was there to speak about the migration of Chinese Americans to Texas and Houston, the communities they have built, and how the communities have evolved over time. And
you know what I found? I found fascinating. I don't want to jump ahead in the conversation, but we talked about building the railroads. But what I particularly found fascinating was there were a number of Chinese Americans that migrated into Texas from Mexico. That was part of the story too, I think, where we had to break away last time. That's fascinating for anybody who's been living in Texas for a while to know something like that.
That is so true. A lot of people didn't know that the Chinese there is so dispersed. So at that time, would you like me to tell the story?
Yeah, go ahead. Okay. Tell us about it. Yeah.
That's great. So that was the third, actually, early wave of Chinese migration to the United States. And the first two waves, as I covered last time, involved the railroad constructions. So after the first Transcontinental was built, Chinese were recruited to fill the labor shortage in South to build the second Transcontinental. So they ended up in Texas. And then the third wave of Chinese came with the U.S. Army. What happened is that the Mexican Revolutionary General Pancho Villa had attacked New Mexico. He had attacked Columbus, New Mexico. So American Army General Black Jack, that's his nickname. Pershing.
Yep.
Pershing. He led the U.S. troops on an expedition in Mexico to capture him. And Pancho Villa was never captured. But when he retreated, he brought with him a large group of people, including Mexican Chinese. There were more than 400 Chinese came with him. What happened in Mexico is that in Chihuahua, the northern Mexican state, the Chinese helped the U.S. troops survive by providing labor and supplies. So the Chinese came with the U.S. troops, and they arrived in San Antonio, but first they were placed in detention. Later on, they were granted temporary residence and were allowed to work for the military installations. So they built Air Force and Army bases, including the one here in Houston, the Ellington Field. And so that kind of led to the surge of the Chinese population. The Chinese communities were built around the railroad routes during the railroad construction years. And El Paso and San Antonio, one time they had the highest share of Chinese populations in the state, and that status was replaced by Houston in the 1950s.
So did they come here initially to Houston for building Ellington Air Base? Was that
yes, the original Chinese who ended up in Houston, they came with the railroad projects as well. They stopped in Houston en route to Calvert in Robertson County to extend the railroad line there to connect to create the second Continental Railroad. And then after the projects were completed, some of them they left, and others they came to Houston. And then the stories from 1950s was somewhat different. It was because the influx were because of the relaxations of the U.S. Immigration and citizenship laws through the next decades. And so the Chinese American population has seen a steady increase in the city. The new immigrants have included now, a lot of students, professionals who became absorbed into our workforce here. And with abundance of the opportunities and needs with our industry here, across industries, actually, we're talking about oil companies, universities, the medical center, and NASA. So they're in, a lot of them, they're now in research, managerial, and technical fields.
Zheng, we've only got about a minute and a half or so, but I found it fascinating as well that we all consider Chinatown in Houston to be off of West Houston, Bel Air Boulevard, but you have some history that it originated in the eastern part of Houston, right?
Yes, exactly. So the Bel Air Boulevard, Chinatown in the Southwest, we call it the New Chinatown, and it wasn't born until in the 1980s. But the original Chinatown was established in east of downtown, and that is where the older generation of Chinese immigrants first call home. Right. And a lot of them, actually, they opened grocery businesses and other businesses in Black neighborhoods. Just like one example is the family of my friend Gordon Kwan, who is the former Houston City Councilman and Mayor Pro Tem. Right. His family had served the grocery business that served the African-American neighborhood for a long time. And so the East Downtown Chinatown was started in the 1950s, actually. By immigrant Chinese to sort of shield themselves from, racism and then create a kind of enclave, to survive. America wanted cheap Chinese labor, but when the labor was provided, they didn't want Chinese to live amongst them. So, immigrants had to segregate themselves and create their own ghettos. But the Chinatown, the old Chinatown in East Downtown, was somewhat different because before long, that became a very thriving Chinese community. It became a very bustling commercial and cultural district, and really the heart of the Chinese community. But sadly, it's now all disintegrated. So at one time, they I believe it was in the 50s or early 60s. They started the Chinese Baptist Church, opened restaurants, tons of restaurants, and Gordon's father even started a bank there. And eventually, Chinatown went through downturns through the 1980s and 90s, due to a multitude of factors: gentrification, aging population, and lack of advocacy and support from the authorities. And ultimately, it was the George R. Brown Convention Center that killed Chinatown. That's strange because, you think of the convention center doing so much to invigorate downtown, but in essence, from what you're telling us, it kind of eliminated a community or made it move to another part of town. Yeah, it was because of the street closures and other, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Yeah, no, I mean, it's a fascinating piece of Houston history, which is now relocated in Southwest Houston.
Yeah, in the Southwest is a vibrant public place now. It's no longer a Chinese enclave, But when it first started, it also was met with hostility from the white residents, in the Sharpstown area. But the community pulled money. They created this tourist to generate revenue, and then drastically improve the area. Now you have, the Bel Air Boulevard has turned now to a 7-lane, really a boulevard, a broad street. And
invigorated that community itself. Zheng, we appreciate you being here on the show once again. Always fascinating to talk with you. And I know you're real busy out there at the Southwest College. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
All right. When we return, we're going to meet one of our former HCC instructors who has now a passion for documentaries. Stick around. The topic returns in 60 seconds.
Sometimes what you need just shows up. Houston Community College has your back, whether you're knocking out some basics or upping your game for a better job. Enroll today for spring classes and frame your future with HCC.
When I was your age, I was just like you, fascinated by stars. But now I get to search for life in the universe. And who knows, maybe life is looking for us too.
So we're like aliens to them?
Yeah. Does anyone want to be a scientist now?
I do.
Awesome. We need more girls in STEM.
Maybe we can find aliens.
Things could be stranger, but I don't know how. I'm going through changes, through all of the strangeness. I'm going through changes now.
Welcome back to The Topic. I'm Todd Duplantis, and we're live every Tuesday afternoon on Facebook and YouTube. Always catch the rebroadcast of this show in our social media under Houston Community College District. And you can watch our rebroadcasts on HCC TV as well. We're celebrating Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And right now we're joined by former HCC instructor Sandra Zheng, who brings an extensive background of experience in journalism and documentary filmmaking. Sandra, good to see you on the show. Welcome back to HCC. I know you were here for quite some time. And for people who may go, I get this every now and then, they'll say, I know you from somewhere. How do I know you? For folks who are saying that right now, they may know you from TV.
Yeah, I was at KHOU for about 8 years, from 1994 through 2002.
Right. So you may recognize it from KHOU. And tell us a bit about your career and how it led you into the classroom.
Oh, goodness. Well, let's take it from my days in California. I was a reporter and producer, and I moved on from Sacramento to San Francisco to Los Angeles, then to Houston in '94. And I've always had a love for documentaries. It was what I did in my career starting out. And a lot of the stories that I did affected the Asian Pacific community. It was at a time where the FCC required, not deregulated, but required that every station must carry minority news or programming. And my show, Perceptions, satisfied that requirement. And I moved on from that show, which was based in Sacramento. And in San Francisco and Los Angeles, I did news as well as producing special long reports. Then I got to Houston, and my good friend Jerome Gray, who I worked at opposite stations in Sacramento, he remembered me and he said, "Would you like to come to Houston?" And I said, "Sure, I'll try it out." And then he said, "But there's two things I have to tell you. You won't like the weather, but you might like the food." And I said, "Okay, I'm in. Anyway, it's been wonderful being here and being a native Californian, because I find that the people here are very accepting and very warm.
And you still have a passion for documentaries, and maybe you can tell us about you have a new film or a new documentary. Tell us about what that is all about.
Okay, this new documentary is called Free Chol Soo Lee, kind of a long name. Chol Soo Lee is the name of a person who was a Korean immigrant who was wrongly accused in a San Francisco Chinatown murder in 1973. In 1983, when he was released, I, as a reporter at KCRA in Sacramento, covered that case. So we're talking about almost 40 years ago.
Right.
And it was a noteworthy case because it was the very first time that Asian groups across the country and through all diverse groups of Asian Pacific Americans, it's the first time they moved together in a kind of political rallying for social justice. And the reason it's a case, or the reason it's important today, is because of some of the things that we're facing as Asian Americans in our country, anti-Asian hate, social injustice, and this kind of invigorated the new generation to stand up. And I think it's tough these days to stand up when we're facing a cancel culture, when it's a lot easier to just kind of sit back and not say anything. So that's why there's this kind of timely approach to an old story and, frankly, a forgotten case.
In looking back at a story like that, did you go back to archive material through your old stations? Obviously, does it bring, in being a journalist, now that we're in the age where we can literally be at home but complete our stories by talking to people virtually, did you use that new medium? Did that assist you in putting this together?
Well, what happened is that I am not the producer or co-producer of this new film. I offered some of my archival footage to new producers, new first-time filmmakers. Their name is Julie Ha and Eugene Yi. And they're at least 1 or 2 generations younger than me. But they got interested in this because an investigative reporter out of Sacramento was their mentor. And he pretty much told them about the first documentary that I had done. And then they contacted me and I said, I have a wealth of video and other materials that might assist you in putting together this documentary, which, by the way, took 6 years.
Wow.
It took me maybe a little less than, well, I collected the archive footage for like maybe 4 or 5 years, but actually pulled it together in one hodgepodge of material for a documentary called A Question of Justice. And that, because, you know, you're under news deadlines. And so I had to slap it together pretty quickly. And it did win us an Emmy Award. So I'm not complaining, but.
Congratulations. Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you this. We have a lot of our students who may be aspiring to be a journalist, whether it's multimedia, TV, a little bit of both, whatever, start their own YouTube channel. What advice would you give young students now who are looking to get into journalism, particularly Asian American students?
Sure. First of all, I would say if you have content, if you know of an issue, push it. Do what you can to get it documented, to get it edited, to offer it. In this case, our first-time filmmakers knew a lot of independent film producers, and they got together with them to get this film together. But I think the most basic thing I have to advise is know your writing, know how to write, know how to pull a story together. In this case, with the case of Chol Soo Lee, you got to know your history, you got to do your research, and you got to know how a story flows. There's an art of storytelling. And if you can do that, you've got half of the job done. If you can tell it through archival footage and make it relatable and understandable, most people feel that the character involved in this case was relatable because he wrote his own memoir about his experience with 10 years imprisonment, the last 4 years of which were spent in solitary confinement. He wasn't very educated, but I'll tell you, when he left prison, he wrote poems and other material that he became quite literate overnight, frankly. But
Sandra, Jen, we are running out of time, but we appreciate you being here and helping to spotlight AAPI and telling us a bit about your career in this fascinating documentary. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. Watch us on HCC TV. Check out our podcast at hccs.edu/podcast. I'm Todd Duplantis, and I'll see you next time.